Hi, I'm Tamara Kelly from mooglyblog.com, and in this video, we're going to be demonstrating how to crochet the add-on bits for the Puppy Squish, a new pattern you'll find for free on mooglyblog.com. To make this pattern, I used a 7mm crochet hook by Furls. You can use a 7mm or an 8mm crochet hook, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that here in a moment. I also used two colors of Bernat blanket, which is a 6 super bulky yarn. Birch and taupe were the colors I chose. Of course, you should choose whatever colors most match the puppy dog you want to make. For the stuffing, you can use a 10-inch micro bead pillow ball or a 10-inch soft round pillow ball or fiberfill or whatever stuffing you prefer. I also recommend having two safety eyes and one safety nose, or you can embroider them on with extra yarn. Stitch markers are one more tool that you'll definitely want to have handy. Now, let's take a closer look at the Puppy Squish and talk about those hook sizes and our stuffing. So I've been designing these 10-inch squish amigurumi animals for a few years now, and primarily I've been stuffing them with 10-inch micro bead pillow balls. Over the years, however, the manufacturer has been stuffing the balls a little bit more every time, and the balls have started to get a little bit big. To compensate for that, we switched from 7mm hooks up to 8mm hooks. Now they have started offering a soft pillow ball as well. This one is not filled with micro beads, but it has that same great shape and it holds its shape really nicely and it is really nice and soft. I believe this ball is closer to the original 10 inches and allows us to go back to the 7mm crochet hook. If you prefer to use the micro bead pillow ball, which I've also linked in the pattern as well as this one, then I recommend you use an 8mm crochet hook. Microbead, 8mm, soft pillow, 7mm. Fiberfill, it's up to you, whatever works best with your stitch gauge. We want to make sure that our crochet is big enough to fit around our ball. Should you finish your crocheting and find that whatever ball you have picked is still a little too big, don't be afraid to take a seam ripper and open up one of the seams and pull out just a little bit of extra stuffing, and then take some thread and sew it right back closed. If you do that with the microbead pillow ball, I do recommend you do it inside a large trash bag, because those microbeads like to spill out quite quickly and they can make a little bit of a mess. So that's just a extra step you can take to make sure that your stuffing is the right size for your squish. Now, let's go ahead and get stitching. So here is a finished puppy squish. We used our standard body pattern, so I've shown that in several patterns now, and we do have a larger body tutorial linked in the pattern as well. This is all just half double crochets worked in a spiral with standard increases until we work even down the sides a little bit and then do just a little bit of decreasing. The belly is the same as the first 5 rows of the body. We stop and then add the feet and crochet once more around so that we have a belly piece and a body piece that as our very last step, we will whip stitch together. And if you look very closely, you can see that seam right there. So we are using the same feet we used in some of the other patterns. We've gone over those before. Our new pieces for the puppy specifically are the eye patch, these long ears, which can be shortened to create a fold over ear that looks a bit like that, if that is the style of ear you're looking for your puppy. And we have a little short tail. Now, designing a puppy squish or a dog squish was one of the hardest squishes I've ever done because, of course, there are so many breeds of dogs out there and they all look a little bit different. So how was I supposed to pick colors, let alone features for our puppy squish? Well, I tried to pick things that were different from other animals we've done before. Like I say, the eye patch is new, but we also have several muzzles on the other animals if you wanted to create that look. Inside this pattern, again, we have the long ears, but if you make these a little bit shorter, and I'll show you how to do that here shortly, you can sew them on facing this way and create sort of a folded over ear look. Now, if I set this aside and pull in some of our other friends, here, for example, is the raccoon squish. You can see the raccoon squish has this style of ear, which might fit your canine friend a lot better. Additionally, while your pet probably doesn't have stripes like this, he might have a big puffy tail like this. This might be the tail style that you want to use for your pet. Same thing if you really wanted to have a muzzle or perhaps even an eye patch. Don't be afraid to grab pieces from the other squishes. We can say the same. This is a big guy. This one used the microbead pillow ball, so you can get it up a little bit bigger. But you can see here we have another style of ear that might fit your pet. In fact, here's the fox squish. I always think this one would be really easily adapted to a corgi, right? With the color split like this. So between color, ears, different tails, you can absolutely customize your dog to get the look you're going for. Here is our cat squish, and even the cat has some really simple ears you might want to use. Or if you're looking for sort of a patchy color pattern like this, you can let the cat squish inspire you as well. Again, it's the same body pattern, we just do some color changes in there. And again, we've got a longer tail here if that's the style you're looking for. This one's designed to sort of flop over to the side. So don't be afraid to pull in those other pieces to customize your puppy and get just the look you're going for. Of course, color matters as well, and Bernat Blanket has tons and tons of colors to choose from. So today, we're going to be covering the ears, the eye patch, and the tail, because those are the new pieces that help make up this version of the Puppy Squish. Let's get started. Now, this pattern does include two different ears, a long floppy version like a hound dog, and a shorter fold-over version like a terrier, but they're actually made the same way. The long floppy version is just a little bit longer, which means we start with just a few more stitches. Now, when I polled the audience, the long floppy version did win as most popular, so that's what I'm going to demonstrate here. But if you wanted to start with the fold-over version, the short version, we'd start with a chain of 6. For the long version, we start with a chain of 9. Now, if you're looking at the puppy and saying, I want the long version, but I want my ears even longer, just add a few more stitches. These are very easy to adjust, and hopefully we'll make that clear here as we make them. So I'm going to go ahead and start by chaining 9. I'm probably getting close, but since I've been talking, I haven't been able to count. So let's see. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I got very lucky. We're right at 9. So after you've chained about as long, a little bit shorter than you want your finished ears to be, what we're going to do is skip the chain closest to the hook, and we're going to place a stitch marker right in that chain. Stitch markers are always handy when you're making these squishes, not just for making the pieces, but for holding everything together. So you want to make sure to have some handy. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that stitch marker right in that last chain we made, like so. So I'm just going to skip that chain, and then I'm going to single crochet in each remaining chain. And I really prefer to work into the underneath loop of each stitch rather than under the top 2 loops. But for this, you can work into whichever part you prefer. I do feel that working into the underneath loop gives you a better finished look, however, so I recommend you give it a try if you haven't before. So we're just going to work our single crochets down here. So since I started with a chain of 9 and skipped the chain closest to my hook, I will end up with 8 single crochets. If I were making the shorter terrier version, I would end up with 5 single crochets because I started with a chain of 6. Like I say, they're essentially worked the same. It's just the terrier version is a little bit shorter, so there's just a few fewer stitches on each row. All right, there we go. So now I have worked a single crochet in each one of those chains, and we have finished row 1 of our ears. Now we're ready for row 2. We're going to start by chaining 1. I'm going to turn and single crochet in the first 8 stitches. So I think I'm going to go ahead and put another stitch marker here right in the first single crochet of this row. Just makes it a little bit easier to come back and find everything for the next round. So there's 1, 2. It also makes it easier, I think, when it comes time to check your working count and make sure you're in the right spot. I always like being able to just see right at a glance where I need to start counting from. So if we single crochet in the first 8 stitches, that's of course going to be all 8 stitches. Remember, we only made 8 stitches in the last row. So there's should be 8 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But now we're going to go around here. We're not going to go all the way around and join. We're just going to be sort of working a U shape back and forth to create that puppy dog ear shape. So this brings us to that marked stitch, the chain that we skipped, right? We left our stitch marker there because we're going to put 3 single crochets in that skipped chain. So having that stitch marker in there just makes it so much easier to find. So there's 1, 2, and I think I'm gonna go ahead and put a stitch marker in that second one just to help me mark the center of that row. It's just a good visual clue to help keep you on track. There we go. So now with 3 single crochets all in that skipped chain, now we're ready to work a single crochet in each remaining stitch up the other side, which should be, of course, another 8. And now what we're actually working into is the bottoms of those chains that we worked into on row 1. And this is one of the reasons I really like working into that underneath loop. It gives us 2 loops to work into here as we come back for the next row and just gives a really nice finished look. So we can see this brings us all the way back here to our very first chain back by our slip knot. And that one always likes to be a little tricky, doesn't it? That chain tends to pull just a little bit tighter. There we go. So I will go ahead and put my single crochet in there. And that is what it should look like at the end of row 2. Now, of course, if we were making the shorter puppy dog terrier version, then this would just be a little bit shorter. We work this end the same. We just have fewer stitches here at the beginning and fewer stitches at the end. But we're going to be working this end, the rounded end, of both of those ears the same. It's just the length back here that is the difference. So moving on to row 3. I'm going to start with a chain 1 and turn, and now I'm going to single crochet in the first 9 stitches. So let's see where that brings us to. There's 1. Let me grab another stitch marker out of my little bowl of stitch markers here, and I'll mark the first one there. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. And with big, thick yarn, especially chenille yarn like this, it's got a little bit of texture to it. It likes to hold on to itself. Always make sure you're pulling those loops up all the way through your stitch. It can be very easy to end up sort of riding those stitches a little bit when we've got a big, thick yarn like this. And of course, take breaks too. If your hands start to get tired or a little sore, it's always a good idea to stop and stretch. All right, let's see what we've got here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Perfect. If this were instead the terrier version, it would just be 6, but we're doing the longer version here, so we've got 9. That brings us right down to that marked stitch, so we know we're in the right spot. That's going to be our center spot. And once again, we're going to work 3 single crochets in that marked stitch. And we'll put our stitch marker right in the center of those 3. So that's our second one. I'll go ahead and move our stitch marker on up, like so. We need to put 1 more in that stitch. And then, whatever size you're making, we just single crochet right on up the other side of our ear. 1 single crochet in each stitch. So far, like I say, exactly the same, both ears. It's just a matter of how many stitches there are here as we work up the side. The curvy end is going to be exactly the same. And you may notice a bit of cupping here on our guy. We're not trying to necessarily work a perfectly sort of flat circle at this end. A little bit of cupping rather, I think does give the ear a little bit of its shape. So with that now, I've worked all the way down to that next marked stitch and need to get some more yarn off my skein here. There we go. But you can see, here's the long version. The shorter version would just be 3 stitches shorter on each side. So we've got a really great puppy ear shape going. And of course, you can stop here if this is the like you look. I like to add 1 more row here, row 4. We're going to start with our chain 1. And once again, now we're going to single crochet in the first 9 stitches, so it's not going to take us quite all the way back to that marked stitch. So again, if you want to always be following the written instructions, if you're making the shorter version here on row 4, we're going to start by single crocheting in the first 6 stitches. But for the longer version, it's going to be 9. So that should take you to right up to the stitch before the stitch marker, whichever size you are making. So I'm just going to keep working my way across here, and then I'll go back. When I think I'm in the right spot, I always like to go back and count and make sure. So I've got 1 stitch left before the stitch marker. So let's see. 1, 2, get those straightened out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yes. So in the stitch, and this is for either size, get to the stitch right before the stitch marker. And then the stitch right before the stitch marker, we're going to work 2 single crochets. 1, 2. Then in the marked stitch, we're going to go ahead and work 3 again. And we don't need to replace the stitch marker there because this is the last row. There we go. Then 2 single crochets in the stitch after that, 1 and 2. And then we just single crochet in each remaining stitch up the side. So as I say, feel free to customize this. Add a few more chains in that first row. If you want it even longer, you can go back around for another round if you want a great big, really wide ear. Whatever look you are going for is A-okay. You are trying to make your dog look like your favorite pet or just your idealized dog. Certainly make whatever features you prefer. So now I'll go ahead and take that stitch marker out and we can set these aside. We're done with them for now, but keep those handy. What we want to do is go ahead and make 2 of these, of course, but before we cut our yarn, leave a little bit of extra length so we can use that extra length to sew our ear onto the body of our puppy squish. I always say better to use those tail ends rather than cut it short, weave it in, and then cut another length of yarn to sew it on with, right? So my rule of thumb to make sure I've got enough length to do my sewing is to sort of triple the length of the seam. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be sewing right along this edge here, the ends of our rows, so that our ear can either hang down and flop down the side of the head, or it can be sewed across the rows and fold over like that. So this is going to be our sewing line. So I will literally just take this end here and sort of lay it triple against there. And if it's something small like this, I might even quadruple it just to give myself a little extra space. And then, of course, we can cut the yarn and you can either pull it through that end or just pull up on the end and leave that ready for sewing. Now, you might be tempted to go ahead and weave in that other end, but I actually like to put this to use too. You can see our first end here is almost exactly in the middle. So when you decide exactly where you want your ear to stick to that body, you can pull this end through first to sort of anchor down the middle and then use this end to sew it in. And of course, when you attach it to the body, be sure to use lots of those stitch markers to help you place it and check the placement before you finish sewing it in. That's how we make the ears for the puppy squish. And up next is our tiny little puppy tail. With the cat, we've got a long skinny tail, and with the raccoon and the fox, we've got big bushy tails. So for our puppy squish, I wanted to make a short little stubby tail, so we have yet another option. So I'm going to start here. I've already got my slip knot on my hook, and I'm going to chain 2. Now, I'm using color B for the ear and the tail and the eye patch, but again, if you are making your favorite puppy or dog, make sure to customize all the colors you use to match your pet. So here I've got a chain of 2. I'm going to skip the chain closest to the hook and work 6 double crochets in the last chain. The chain right next to the slip knot there. So there's 1, and I think I'm going to go ahead and mark the top of that double crochet, because I know I'm going to come back around and I want to be able to find that double crochet. So there's 1, let's do a 2, 3, 4. Just take your time with this big yarn, pull those loops up and through. 5 and 6. There we go. And you can see this takes us a good portion of the way around our little circle here, but isn't quite flat. We just want to stop right there. Now what we're going to do is join with our slip stitch to that first double crochet. So what I'm going to do is, since we're working in the round, joined rounds especially, I'm going to put a stitch marker right in that last double crochet right there. That will help me make sure not to work into the slip stitch unless that's, of course, something I want to do. So, looks a little crazy right now, but we're going to slip stitch and it's going to pull everything in for the tip of that tail. So we work our slip stitch like so, pull it in nice and tight, go ahead and tighten up that slip stitch. We're not going to be working back into it. We want a nice firm tail there. Now, if you want to, at this point, it's a good time to go ahead and weave in that end. That said, you can just go ahead and leave it hanging in there. You don't need to trim it off. We can use it to actually stuff the tail itself. No reason to use extra stuffing when we've already sort of got it attached. All right. So there is our first round. Now we have 2 more rounds for our tiny little tail. Again, feel free to customize this to whatever look you like. For both rounds 2 and 3, we're going to start with a chain 1, and I'm going to single crochet in the first 3 stitches. So let's move that stitch marker, and I'm going to put it right in the top of this stitch so we don't lose our place. There we are. And then I will single crochet in the next 2. So we have a total of 3. So there's 2 and 3. And then we double crochet in the last 3. 1, 2. And this one should be marked. It's our last stitch. So, yep, there we are in our marked stitch, number 3. So I will move up that stitch marker. Now, why are we splitting the row like that? Why is the first half in single crochet and the second half in double crochet? This is what puts the curve in our little tail. So if you wanted a perfectly straight tail, you'd want to use the same stitch throughout. But we're doing this on purpose to create a little bit of a curve. Now, all those stitches made for round 2, we want to join with our slip stitch to the first stitch down there. And again, I will go ahead and pull that nice and tight. Now we're going to do that row one more time, or that round, I should say. Chain 1. We're going to single crochet in the first 3. There's the first one. And since we're going to join, I'm going to go ahead and put my stitch marker in there so I can find it again. And then the next 2, so there's 2 single crochets, 3 single crochets, and then 3 double crochets. 1, 2. We're working basically around a little tube here, so take your time, get to those little stitches. This is going to be our last one, so I'll go ahead and take that stitch marker out and set it aside. There we go. You can see my yarn's pulling, so I want to pull up a little extra there. Now we are done. So you can go ahead and join that first single crochet and pull that slip stitch tight. So let me pull up on that end a little bit here. So you can see this is just, my hook wants to roll away. There we go. You can see this is just a little guy, a little tail. Here is our single crochets. Here's our double crochets. The double crochets sort of push that curve up. Single crochets pull it down. So we get a cute little stubby tail with a little bit of a curve to it. If you want to make that longer, you can keep repeating rows 2 and 3 till you get the length you like. Once you've got the length you like, of course, we want to do the same thing that we did with the ear. Make sure we leave enough tail here to sew, enough tail end to sew on our tail, basically. So we can take our scissors, or with Bernat blanket, you can usually just pull it apart. But we want to make sure we've got plenty to get around before we break our yarn. And then once we've got that, we can, of course, take that last stitch marker out of there. We don't need it anymore. And I will just pull up on that loop. And now it's ready for sewing. And the great thing is it doesn't really need any stuffing. I could stuff it if I wanted to, but you can see it holds its shape and is nice and squishy just the way it is. So now it's ready for sewing on wherever you like. So our final piece that's special to the Puppy Squish is the eye patch. Again, I'm going to be using color B, but you can make the eye patch with whatever color matches your pet, or of course, skip the eye patch altogether if your ideal pet doesn't have one. To make the eye patch, I start with a magic circle. So to do that, I go over the first finger of my non-hook hand towards me twice. It's a lot of words for that motion right there. We go over, and you'll see how the yarn comes towards me. Now I'm going to use my fingers to hold onto those ends so that these 2 loops are stable, and I can use my hook to slide under both of those loops. There we go. I'm going to use the end of my hook to grab this loop back here, the one closest to the knuckle, and just pull it under the edge of the other loop. You can see I'm holding that in place with my thumb and forefinger down here. Now I'm going to yarn over and pull a loop up and through. Now I'm ready to start following the instructions, which say to chain 1, There we go. And then work a single crochet into the ring. So when I work into the ring, I'm going to insert my hook under that loop and under that tail end right there, which is now just kind of hanging out. Yarn over and pull up my loop, pull that up nice and high for my single crochet, and finish my single crochet. Now my loop is nice and steady, so I'm going to pull my finger out. You can see it's nice and open for me to be able to work into there. I do recommend that you use a stitch marker in that first stitch, like so. And I like to go ahead at this point, especially with this chenille yarn, while I've got a little bit more control, and just pull that loop. We don't want to pull it all the way closed, so we have to be careful. Just pull gently and close it up a little bit. As we put more stitches in there, it can be difficult to close that up without breaking the yarn. There we go. So put my hook back in the loop, and now we're ready to continue crocheting. We've got our single crochet made, so the rest of the round calls for 9 half double crochets. So we're going to yarn over, and each time we're going to go into that loop, but we want to make sure the tail end also goes over our hook. So we're essentially crocheting around the ring and the tail. That will allow us to finish pulling that loop closed. So there's 1, and here's 2 half double crochets. Especially with the half double crochets, be sure to take the time to really pull the loop up and through here. We want our eye patch to be relatively flat. So scooch those stitches on over there and keep squeezing them in there until you have a total of 10 stitches, including the single crochet. So now I've worked a total of 10 stitches into the ring, a single crochet followed by 9 half double crochets. You can see our tail end is sticking out back there and that I have trapped it inside each one of those stitches. Now, on our finished stuffy, on our finished squish, we're going to be sending one of our safety eyes right through that magic circle. So while it's fine to tighten it up, we don't want to make it super duper tight. The way I like to do that is sort of stabilize everything and then just gently pull on that tail end right there, and you'll feel it sort of move within your fingers, and you'll feel if you're pulling too hard and the yarn is at risk of breaking. And like I say, if you end up with a little bit of a gap there, don't worry about it. We actually want just enough room there to fit our safety eye through, so that is absolutely fine. In fact, I've got a safety eye right here, still has the wrapper on it. Let me take that off real quick. There we go. And you can see that hole is right where you're going to be sending your safety eye. And you can see by the thickness of this yarn, when we go to assemble our squish, more than likely you're going to put the safety eye on the eye patch and then sew the eye patch to the squish rather. I tried really hard. I don't think the shaft on most safety eyes are long enough to reach through both layers. So just keep that in mind as you are making your eye patch here. For now, I'm just going to go ahead and let that end hang out here. And now we're ready for one more round for this one, round 2. Now, I said round, but I probably should have said row because you'll notice I haven't joined to that first stitch and we're not going to. We're going to chain 1 and turn. You'll notice in the finished squish, there's a little bit of a notch in the eye patch. I think that gave it a really nice look and sort of opened up space for the nose. If you, for your pet, want a perfectly round eye patch, then absolutely you should join there before you turn and work back the other direction. We're going to leave our notch. So I've got my chain 1, and now I'm just going to work 2 half double crochets in each stitch across. Now, I could mark this first stitch here with a stitch marker, but I don't need to. It's our last round. So I'm just going to go and put 2 half double crochets in each one of these stitches. So here you can see I have finished row 2 of our eye patch. Now, same thing as when we made our other pieces. We want to make sure to leave a long enough piece of tail to sew it on to our finished body. So for this one, since we want to sort of go all the way around and through that center section, I'm just going to really loosely go around it 3 times here, all the way around. And I know that that will be plenty to do my seaming with. Then I can pull up on that end and set it aside while I finish any other pieces. Then we're ready for assembly. So when it's time to assemble your squish, it's important to add the ears, the tail, and to add the feet to the belly. Making the feet and then making the belly are sort of their own set of instructions. Again, follow the written instructions. I've covered the belly in several of the other squish videos. But it's really important to add all the pieces before you do the final seam right here. It's just a whole lot easier to add these when you have access to the inside of your squish. So what I like to start with is the ears. Now, when we make the body, we're going to end up with a marked stitch right back here at the center, and that's going to be the last single crochet of the final round. And we can use this to sort of visually mark the center of our animal, the center back, if you will. So I will use that to come up to the center here. We can see this is the first round where we began our body, and then count out 4 rows or so, and then attach our ears. So for the long floppy down the sides style of ears, the hound dog ears, if you will, I found the row where I wanted them to start and just sewed them so you can see right between 2 rows. I use that as my guideline for each ear. Are they perfect? Absolutely not, but they are cute. So if you want to, you can go ahead. I do recommend actually that you take your stitch markers and sort of pin them in place before you start sewing them on. And then as you sew them, of course, check the placement before you do weave in any of your ends. Now, again, this is the long floppy version. If I were doing this for the shorter terrier version, I would instead, we'll pretend this is up a little higher, I would sew it this direction, up the rows rather than this way. So you can decide your placement. Again, different breeds and different types of dogs are going to have their ears in different places. So totally feel free to adjust these to fit your pet. But find the place sort of halfway through the body. Try and create a straight line. With this row, you can use your center end to sort of pull it through right where you want it centered, and then use your stitch markers to line it up here. And then you're just going to take a yarn needle and sew right through both layers to hold it down in place. Then for this fold over version, which is of course a little bit shorter than our ear right here, you can see, let me get that good and centered here. You're just going to go ahead and let it naturally fold over like this, or depending on your puppy, you can take an extra stitch. Sew it down if necessary. Sew it down up here if that's the style of ear you're going for. I really wanted to make it as easy for you as possible to customize the look to get the look you want for your pet. So I recommend you start with the ears. So much personality comes out in the ears. Don't be afraid, like I say, to pin them down with your stitch markers and adjust and readjust a couple of times to find exactly the look you're looking for. Once you've gotten the ears sewn on, then I like to move on to the face. The ears sort of give us a nice center point to help us line up our face here, opposite, of course, of that last stitch marker with our single crochet. And you can start the face with whatever parts you like. As I say, the eye patch is totally optional, but you do need, in my experience, if you do want to use it, put that safety eye through just the eye patch and then sew the eye patch on. So again, I recommend you try a couple different placements for your eyes and your nose. Um, you can take a little clip to sort of clip them in place and even stuff the ball in there and really take a good look at it before you put the backs on your safety eyes and noses. Once those safety eyes and noses are attached, you can remove them, but you're going to lose the backing. You're going to have to cut the backing off. So try and make sure they're right where you want them before you put them on all the way. Once those are on, of course, you can add extra details. I added a little smile and nose line here with our color B. You can dress that up, add different looks, make him a sad puppy if you wanted to. Take a little pink yarn and make a little tongue. I think that would be super cute. Like I say, lots and lots of ways to customize this. Lots of different eyes and nose sizes and colors on the market, so you can have a lot of fun there as well. Once all that's done, then of course we can't forget about our tail, whatever tail style you want to go with. I sort of aimed mine a little bit up and to the left here, but again, we can use our ears. If things have gotten off track again, go by the ears. But we can also use that stitch marker if we still have that down here to help us line up our tail and get it sewn on securely. I went just a row up or so from our last round here, you can see, but you can place your tail wherever you like. And of course, use a big bushy tail, a different style of tail, whatever fits your pet. Once the tail, the ears, and the face are on, and any other accoutrements or little special bits you want to add to your puppy, then finally you should have the finished belly with the feet attached, ready with its long tail, and then you will just add whatever stuffing you want to add, and then sew on your belly. Again, I use the whip stitch, which I do have a separate video tutorial for, to just whip those 2 pieces together. Now, when it comes time to join those, it's going to look like the body is way too big for the belly, but they should have the exact same number of stitches. So once again, you're going to take your stitch markers and join 1 stitch on this to 1 stitch on the body. You can do that every 5 stitches or so all the way around, and then when it comes time to take that long tail, you'll just sew the 2 pieces together all the way around nice and tight, and it will all come together. And you'll have just that one last end to weave in. And that's it. And that's how to crochet the Puppy Squish. Don't forget, you can take parts from other squish patterns to create a canine companion that looks just right for you. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.